Hello and welcome to Rubyvale Road. I'm Alexandra, and this video I will be showing you inside my sewing kit all the wonderful fantastic tools that I love and use, and I thought that maybe you might like to see what tools I do keep on hand, just in case it might give you a little bit of help in sort of filling the gaps of your sewing kit. Or of course, if you have any recommendations of tools and things that you love to use for sewing, please let me know. And leave a comment down below. Before we get started, please subscribe to Rubyvale Road and give the video a thumbs up so that I know you could like this sort of content. And I'm very excited to be sharing, of course, more sewing videos in the future. As you will see, I like to hold a lot of variety in my sewing kit. To be completely honest, I lose things really easily, and I'm sort of sewing all over the house. I sew in my room here, but then I also sew out at the dining room table to cut everything out. So I like having a couple of things, just so if I lose them or they're out in the dining room, sometimes I'm a bit too lazy to walk back out and get them, and I'll have another lot here at my sewing machine. And also I just like to, just like my variety. Anyway, so I really hope you enjoy this, and let's get into it. So starting with the big sharp pointy things, as you'll know in sewing, mostly everything is sharp and pointy, so it's a little bit scary. But the scissors, of course, I think investing in a good pair of scissors is really, really important. It makes cutting a hell of a lot easier. I'm still old-fashioned and like to cut with scissors. I know that rotary cutters are very popular now. I do have them, just not really for me. I find a pair of scissors just that bit easier, or I guess what I'm more familiar with. So I have a very beautiful pair of shears. These were given to me by my sister when I graduated from high school, so they're very, very precious and just beautiful, really. So these are by the brand Merchant and Mills, made in Sheffield, England. They've got a really beautiful weight to them. They're quite big, as you can see, so they make a really good, gorgeous glide. And yeah, they're just an absolute pleasure to use, and I really, really love these, and yeah, they're fantastic. But in saying that, scissors, you can pick up a really good pair of scissors without having to spend too much money. In fact, I still have the first pair of sewing scissors I have had, which was when I went to high school, and I think we just picked these up from Spotlight, and they came in like a pack of 3. So my mum actually has the other pair, she's still got them, and then they also had like a little pair of embroidery scissors. And yes, if you look after them, the scissors can do you really, really well. The rule is, and is very, very important to remember, is that you only use paper scissors on paper and fabric scissors for fabric. That way you won't go blunting the edges. And the other thing is, don't drop your scissors, because that makes them go blunt as well. So yeah, just some little things to look after your scissors and keep them in good nick. So yeah, these are just, I've always just used these on fabric, and to be honest, they've just done really, really well. I've had these for like 10 years now, I guess, or over 10 years. So yeah, they do really good. And then in saying that about the little rule about paper scissors, well, I also have then a pair of paper scissors for cutting out paper patterns and whatnot. They do come in handy just to have in sort of like my kit. Of course, with making patterns, I also need like pens and pencils and a calculator, because I'm terrible at maths, but I didn't really include all those bits in this sewing kit. But yeah, do need a pair of paper scissors. They are very good too. And another type of pair of scissors is called, these ones are called pinking shears. So these have the zigzag edge, and these are really, really handy, of course, for cutting fabrics to prevent from fraying and making little easy craft projects. These come in very, very handy. I would actually say, if you have the option, I would actually invest in a pair of pinking shears and probably like a cheaper pair of scissors if you're just starting out, because these pinking shears are very handy for anyone starting to sew, just so that you do prevent fraying that little bit easier. Yeah, I like my pinking shears, and I've used these a lot, so I would suggest trying to get your hands on a pair of these as well. And I don't think these are excessively expensive nowadays either. Again, I guess it just depends what quality you buy and whatnot. These aren't totally top quality though, and yeah, they do totally fine. Perfect. Again, it's still about just sort of like looking after things, and yeah, eventually they will probably blunten and wear out, but at the moment they are still going very well. And then lastly in the scissors department are these fantastic little clippers, or as my mum calls them, snips, snip snips, because they literally sound like snip snips. But these are so handy. They're a lot easier than those little embroidery scissors which you put your fingers through. I also have quite a few pairs of them, which are great and look really beautiful. Unfortunately, I've only got actually one pair of these. I really want to pick up another pair. I'm pretty sure you can even pick these clippers up in Daiso, so they are really readily available. Do try to get a good quality pair though, or they are really frustrating when they're blunt. So yes, you might also need to replace them quite regularly because, yeah, I remember at work when they'd go blunt, it was just so frustrating. So yes, they are all my sharp and pointy things. So on to the next category, which is also sharp and pointy, but just on a bit of a smaller scale. We're going into pins. So with pins, I like to have lots and lots of pins, and again, I like to have all sorts of different vessels for my pins because obviously you need some at the sewing machine and then some when you're cutting out and all over the place. So I have a pin cushion which my mum made, or maybe actually I made this, and if you were thinking about what was pinking shearing, so you can see, although this is frayed quite a lot now because it's very old, but this was originally pinking sheared and around the leaves and that, so we just used pinking shears to actually make this little pin cushion, which is really cute. It's like a little strawberry. Yeah, so pin cushions are really handy, but actually I prefer a little dish. This was actually from Urban Outfitters, I think. When I went to America I bought it. It's really cute. It's got a little squirrel, and it's actually a jewellery holder, but I use it for pins, and it's really handy because it's like flat and quite broad, so I can just keep that at my machine rather than having to take a pin out and put it into the pin cushion. So lazy, right? Oh my god. Height of laziness, but I do really find this very, very handy, and it's got like the good little handle so you can just take it around. When it comes to pins, ooh, I got these pins like in high school and they're really great because they're nice and long, but actually as I have gotten older I really don't like big headed pins because they can get stuck under the sewing machine if you're not really good at taking pins out. Again, probably height of laziness with me not taking pins out fast enough. So I probably don't actually prefer long pins or big headed pins. And saying that, I find that little pearl headed pins are just fine. I quite like these ones. They've just got like a plastic pin head, and they're quite a decent length, so they're good. But then I also have pins. This is where I start getting into different varieties of things, and these are beautiful. I picked these up at Lincraft, and these are glass headed pins. So they've got a glass head on them and they're just super sharp, and I like to have these to differentiate between my regular pins. Oh, sorry, I dropped it there. I like to have these to differentiate between my regular pins so that when I'm sewing really beautiful fine silks, I have good quality pins that I know aren't going to pull the fabric, because sometimes these pins, especially if you're using them on a variety of different fabrics, say from like heavy denims or corduroys and whatnot, can sometimes easily blunt. So yes, I like to keep my glass headed pins for sewing silk, just so I have that difference and know that they are being kept, especially for good fabrics. So yes, that's just my little sewing tip, a little bit of OCD, but it certainly helps because the last thing you want to do when you're using expensive fabric is ruin it before you even get to wear it. So that is definitely important for me, just to have that little bit of variety. So I'm sure we have all heard the rule or the saying, I'm not sure which one it is, a little bit of a guideline, is that what they say? Guideline. Measure, measure and measure again, certainly in sewing and probably in most walks of life with anyone who has to measure anything. So in that regard I have 3 rulers here. Obviously tape measure, can't live without a tape measure, constantly around my neck. I think I get a little bit paid out for it from my brother because he's always like, oh look at you pretending to be a sewer. I am a sewer actually, that's kind of my profession. So anyway, I love a tape measure, and always have centimeters to inches. It makes very, very easy conversion. Obviously, if you are following a tutorial which is given in inches, it's very easy then to just flip it over to your centimeters or vice versa. Also, tape measures are awesome for quick math, so if you ever want to try and divide, say 48, you can just fold your tape measure in half and then boom, you know it's 24. Yes, that is probably maths we should all know off the top of our head, but sometimes you'll get funny numbers, and just folding the tape measure in half makes it a lot easier to, you know, do that. I just have a regular ruler then. Oh, hit myself in the head. Sorry. Just a regular ruler. This is a wooden ruler. I remember at work we had lovely metal rulers, and I see my dad has one, so I kind of want to see if I can get him to pick me up a metal ruler because they're really great and nice and straight and whatnot. I don't like having, see how there's a gap between the 0 and the edge? The metal ruler starts right from the edge, which I much prefer. But anyway, these are just great, of course, just for measuring things and to have on hand and ruling straight lines if you need for your pattern making and whatnot. And then when you do start getting into pattern making, I definitely, absolutely, you must get a French curve. That is not a question, because for me, picking up a French curve just made life a hell of a lot easier. Like, I used to use dinner plates and things trying to get curved edges on my patterns, and then finally you get a French curve, and it comes with this fantastic instructions sheet showing you like all the places that you use or how to position the French curve. So obviously this is for like, this edge is for the hip of a skirt, or this, you turn it like up this way to get your armhole, and all those great things. So yes, I highly recommend a French curve. It took me ages actually to hunt one down because I was looking in all these big fabric shops when in fact our little local fabric store had one, so that was really handy. It definitely makes life a lot easier for pattern drafting or pattern grading, or what is the word I'm looking for? Like pattern adjusting, I guess, if you're trying to adjust the size a little bit or like bring something in. Yeah, it just makes beautiful, smooth, perfect lines. I just want to know which genius came up with the French curve actually, because it's incredible how clever this thing is. It's like just a piece of plastic that works magic and miracles. So they're all the rulers I like to have on hand. I think a French curve in Australia might be like $20 to $30. Measuring tapes, they shouldn't be too expensive, and then a regular ruler just from like a stationery shop and whatnot. Not anything that you really need to spend too much money on, so they are really good. So I'm not going to go too much into sewing machines today, but I definitely recommend having a lot of bobbins. So I've got an industrial sewing machine, so these are my metal bobbin cases, but obviously for domestic machines they mostly come in little clear plastic. I think if you can get a lot of them, I think it's really great, because I know that I don't have very many bobbins, and it's really frustrating having to change the colour of the bobbins all the time. I'm not really sticking to most of the same colours at the moment, sort of branching out a little bit, and it's a little bit annoying having to change over to the colours. So I'd recommend investing and buying quite a few bobbins if you can, and it's probably cheaper actually to buy a lot at once, yeah, then rather than individual. So look out for bobbins and bobbin cases. You'll find with sewing there's a lot of times that we've got to turn fabric out the right ways, especially when you're making, say, straps or scrunchies, or threading elastic through elastic casings and whatnot. So these two little things come in handy all of the time with so many sewing projects, and I'd definitely recommend safety pins. Obviously you can buy like a good little stack of safety pins of all different sizes, because sometimes you need finer safety pins for your finer elastic and bigger safety pins for your bigger elastic. So I definitely recommend getting a good variety of sizes. So safety pins are just as probably important as regular pins with sewing. They do come in handy very, very often. And then the other part is this loop turner. I think that I've seen this other loop turner, I think on TikTok, which is like plastic or something, and it looks really good too, which I'd love to try. But this one is just a very fine wire, and it's got a little hook at the end of it that you hook onto the fabric and then you pull through the right way. This is just such a time saver, and it's fantastic because you can make things as thin as you like, so you can make really beautiful bias cut shoestring straps and whatnot, because it's so fine that it will pull it out the right way, and it's definitely a lot quicker. Oh, sorry. It's definitely a lot quicker than just using a safety pin, but you'll need safety pins for threading elastic, because this doesn't really do that. But yes, they're two little handy tools to have. I don't know how much a loop turner is. I feel like they wouldn't be more than $10. I know I'd never seen these or heard of these before I worked in the sewing industry. As soon as I saw these at work, I was like, oh my god, I need to get myself one of them. Absolute life changer. And so I got my hands on one just from Lincraft. I just picked that up. So they shouldn't be too expensive, and certainly worth the money because they save so much time, make things a lot easier. Another part that is very important in sewing is obviously marking the fabric. Sometimes you need to trace around your patterns or trace around your clothes, and you need to mark the fabric with things that are going to rub off your fabric, not to leave a mark. So obviously the first choice is chalk. Also chalk comes in lots of great colours, so white obviously very handy for black, but then you've also got blue and orange, and I think I also have yellow chalk. But yeah, I just bought this in a little plastic case, I think it was, with the 4 colours, and they're really great. This is like fairly waxy chalk, so you do have to go quite like hard on it to make a mark on the fabric. I know that there's like a really nice soft chalk which we actually used at work, but it is really annoying because it does leave like, it leaves a powdery white finish sort of all on over the fabric, so you got to like rub it off. As this one sort of just washes out when you wash your clothes, so it's really easy. But yes, I would definitely recommend getting a good little selection of coloured chalk, and like I said, they come just in like the 4 colours as they are, so that's really easy. And then the other things that we had at work which were awesome are these little what are they? These just came from China, and these were just little iron off markers which are so good, so that you can just mark the fabric and then once you iron it with heat it just disappears, which is amazing. We'd all sort of freaked out when we first saw them. We're like, oh my god, they're gonna stain the fabric, but they didn't. And they worked really, really well. I think they also came in white. I tried to look for these the other day, but I could only find like the markers that wash off with water. I couldn't find anything that was removable with heat, which is really frustrating because I love these, but they do dry out quite quickly. They don't really last very long, probably just not very good quality, but they're so handy because they just mark the fabric a lot easier than chalk does actually. And then they iron out, so it's really good. But the other thing is, with these being so conveniently ironing off, is that if you do mark something that is really important and then you iron your fabric, these will make those very important marks disappear. So you've got to be very careful of that. If you want your marks a little bit more permanent between ironing and whatnot, then obviously chalk would probably be your safer bet. I do know at work we would mark things, take the pins out of it, give it an iron because it was all too creased, and then we'd lose the marks and the pins of what we'd measured. So that could be a little bit dangerous. And then I thought I would put these 3 little things in a weird category together. I would be absolutely killed if I did not include a thimble. My mentor Eva, which is a tailoress trained in Hungary, and she said it is impossible to hand sew without a thimble. So I do really think it's very important that you get a thimble that actually fits your finger, because obviously if it's too big it's really annoying and they do come off. Yes, so definitely see if you can get a good little thimble that fits your finger. Normally they do go on the middle finger here, and then you can just use that to help push your needle through. Definitely makes life a lot easier, especially if you're hand sewing thick fabrics. I also just love like the tradition or the symbolism of a thimble with sewing in the sewing kit, so I think they're really cute to have too. Obviously we were all going to make mistakes, and it always comes a time when you have to unpick in sewing. It's sort of just part of the process. You've got to learn to accept that as part of the process. In fact, I wrote a whole blog post about the joy of unpicking, so definitely you will need a quick unpick on hand for those times. This one is just decorative. I don't actually use this for sewing, but it's so beautiful. It's gorgeous, and I'm really sorry because I'm not sure where this came from. A really lovely friend gave it to me. She spent many years in England, so I'm not sure if she bought it in England from a little craft shop or where she picked it up, but it's got Madeleine, little French Madeleine on the top of it, and I loved Madeleine when I was little, so this is really gorgeous and very precious to me. In saying that about unpicking though, I actually just use my clippers to unpick. I find it a lot easier to just clip and just clip the threads and then sort of give a gentle tug and then clip the next thread. And then of course you need a very good selection of hand sewing needles. This is a really gorgeous little needle book that my mum gave me, so it's just got like felt pieces here to put your hand sewing needles into. You'll need you need a good selection of hand sewing needles, but these normally come in a packet with all the different sizes, because you'll need maybe bigger and thicker needles for thicker fabrics, and then very fine needles, especially if you're doing any sort of beading and whatnot. Having a good eye on the needle obviously helps to make it a lot easier to see with threading. Picking up a packet of needles is probably quite cheap, so they're not too hard to get your hands on, but I would also say try to probably invest actually in a packet that's probably costs a little bit more money, but should be a lot sharper and a lot better, because there's just, again, nothing worse than a blunt needle trying to sew. It just makes life a lot harder. And if you think just because you've got a sewing machine you don't need hand sewing needles, I can bet you there always comes a time when you might need to hand sew like a button, or hand sewing for invisible mending or anything like that. Yes, definitely have some hand sewing needles on hand just for those moments too. And then the very last things I wanted to share with you in my sewing kit, which I finally just got my hands on and is the reason why I'm finally doing this video, because I really wanted to include these. These are accessories for ironing and pressing seams, and we used these at work, and since coming home and not having these anymore, I've like really noticed the difference. So I can't wait to finally be using these. I've already made a dress with sleeves and I've been able to use this, and it definitely makes a big difference. So these are quite expensive. These are like $30 each, which I think is a little bit outrageous. In fact, I really want to like start making these, I think, because I don't really see them very often. They're not really talked about a lot, and I think that they are things that should be talked about because they make things a lot easier. So this is a pressing ham, so you'll use this for pressing like darts and whatnot, so that you've still got a really nice curved edge, so you're not pressing it flat on an ironing board, because obviously darts are to create shape in our bodices and whatnot. But they're also fantastic because you iron for armholes and sleeves, so you can put your garment over this and then you can use your iron to iron over the top of it, sort of thing, so you can sort of hold it up and whatnot. And it's really good just for ironing if you want to iron like really specific areas. You can use this to put them wow, explanations really not great today, sorry. So these are really great if you're ironing like little specific areas on a garment, because you can just sort of lay the fabric or lay the garment on that straight onto the pressing ham and then give it a good press. So yeah, these are really, really great. And then this is a sleeve roll, so when you're working on longer sleeves and whatnot, you can slide the sleeve on and then press open the seam flat. And yeah, it's really great because then it doesn't create creases everywhere else, which I was finding really, really difficult when I made that hot pink dress with the big balloon sleeves, because as soon as I like pressed somewhere, it just totally creased everything else. So these are really great for being nice and specific with what you want to press, and these are really good for pressing any sort of curved seams and darts. Yeah, so I picked those up, really, really handy. Have I said that like 3 times now? But keep your eye out for these and save up the money to try and get these, because I had finally, yeah, when I saw them I was like, oh no, I really wanted to buy them, but I was like, damn it, they're so expensive. And then finally the other day I just bit the bullet and I was like, these are gonna make life a lot better and a lot easier. So I did pick up both of them just to make my sewing just a little bit better, and they do help, so I do definitely recommend these. Okay, I think that was everything that I wanted to share in the sewing kit. I've sort of just gone through like all of the tools and useful bits for sort of all throughout the sewing process, really. We've got from cutting to ironing and marking the fabric and pins, all of the basics, but just my little tips and recommendations I hope might help you in the future if you're on the lookout for anything along these lines, or maybe if I've shown things that you've never even heard of before. I hope they do really help. So please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to Rubyvale Road for more sewing videos. And I really love sharing about sewing and sharing whatever I can with what I know or what I think really helps, because sewing is so much fun, and like I said, having the right tools makes it all the more better for enjoying the sewing process and using beautiful tools to really create beautiful garments. Of course, that's what it all comes down to, and making things that you love. And yes, of course, sewing is a fantastic hobby or pastime, but in my instance I do see it as my profession, so I do appreciate having a good variety and really good quality tools to help me produce work as best as possible. So I hope that's everything. I think that it will be everything that I have to say. Thank you so much. I hope you're all having a great day or night. Hope your sewing projects are coming along fantastically, and I shall see you in my next video. Best wishes on all your sewing adventures. Thank you so much. Bye bye.